This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, well, apparently they're letting us know the meeting's being recorded twice. That's fantastic. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I got JJ Miller here. He's from Roman Reel, and we were just talking to one of his coworkers, Marcus, a couple weeks ago, and I was told that JJ is quite the Stillwater expert there. So I'm looking forward to talking to him and picking his brain from there. So without further ado, JJ, what's up, man?
Not much. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. I heard you guys had some weather today too, huh?
Well, the storm's starting to come in now. Gotten a lot of wind. We got hit pretty hard just a couple days ago. It probably the biggest snowstorm we've had in a while. Park City Ski Resort, it's about an hour from where I live, and they ended up getting 29 inches like in a 12-hour period. So pretty wild.
You guys are, correct me if I'm wrong, in Utah, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Reno you're referring to, yeah?
Snow? Park City. Yeah.
Park City. Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's a big ski and a ski resort there, from what I've been told.
Yeah, it's pretty popular.
Do you ski?
Lots of ski areas around here.
What's it? Lots of them.
Sorry, what was that?
No, I just said there's a lot of ski areas in that area. You said?
Yeah, a lot.
Have you been to Park City before?
Oh yeah, been up and around that area. There's the middle section of the Provo that's pretty popular for fly fishing, like right through Park City area as well. So frequent that area a lot.
Yeah, it seems like you guys have quite a bit of good fishing in that area too.
I mean, it's good for what it is. We're not. I mean, we take pride in what we got, and we enjoy what we're able to. I mean, it's not as pristine or as I guess the opportunities quite are as well. I can't think of the right word, but not quite as advanced or prestigious as some other areas. You know, thinking in the West specifically, like Montana, Idaho, some of those real world-renowned destinations. We don't really have anything like that here in Utah, but we got some hidden gems if you're willing to work for them.
Yeah. Have you traveled outside of Utah? I mean, you have. I mean, I've seen that in your bio. Where have you traveled that are, in your opinion, some prestigious fishing areas?
Oh man, I grew up in Idaho, so I'm always biased to the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake. That to me is just like the epitome of perfect fly fishing water. Like that's where you want to go. You know, I love it up there. You know, the Tetons area, like all that area of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, all through there, kind of along the stretches. But I don't know, man. I just like traveling a lot anywhere I can and learning new areas to fish and new ways to fish. I mean, trout fishing is my go-to. It's in my backyard. It's what I grew up doing, and it's what I'm always passionate about. But I'm all about learning to go target new species as well, and going fly fishing the ocean. That's like my new frontier right now. I dream about that all the time, and always looking forward to my next adventure where I can get out on the salt. And I can't get enough of that right now. I want to learn how to better fly fish in the ocean. You know, so
how long have you been in the ocean fishing?
So, I mean, growing up as a kid, I've done the deep sea fishing in that with traditional spin cast gear and all that, but my first time fly fishing in the ocean wasn't until 3 years ago. So I'm still very much a novice, very brand new to it. And man, it broke me. Freshwater fishing is never going to be the same.
I bet. What did you catch out on the salt on the fly for the first time?
So my first trip, I was down in Cabo, Mexico, and I was going after rooster fish. I mean, talk about a species to like cut your teeth in on fly fishing. I don't know what I was totally naive, but didn't know what I was getting into. And I actually didn't end up getting a rooster, but I still caught a really large Jack Crevalle, about a 15-pounder, like, which is pretty good size for a Jack. And man, it ripped me good. It was awesome.
What size rods are you guys using? Like 10 weight pluses or?
Yeah, it was 10 weight is throwing. So
a bet that gets heavy after a while, huh?
Yeah, and like I was on a small little skiff boat, and they didn't have a lean bar, so I was like had my knees like wedged up against the side of the boat, and like you're hitting the waves and surf, and the wind's blowing, and so it's a workout trying to even get a cast out, quickly, because like the opportunities for the fish when they show themselves, like you got to get that cast out quick and far, and so man, it was definitely the most grueling physical fishing I've ever done.
I've heard that about ocean fishing, like the Keys and your other tropic Bahama like water areas. It can be tough because a lot of it, I guess it depends. Like if you're on flats, like bonefish and other species like that are sight fish oriented. It's challenging because you got a lot of wind in there. You got to have a lot of like pinpoint accurate casts from there. And boy, man, I don't know if I could do that. Like I do a lot of spay, and even in the wind with the spay rod, man, it's tough. So with a single hand rod, I can only imagine what that's like when you're out there and you're not protected by anything and it's just wide open and the wind's whipping in your face.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like you say like freshwater, but it's like, well, what kind of freshwater? You got rivers, streams, creeks, you got lakes and reservoirs. Like there's all certain different types of freshwater that require all different tactics. And I mean, saltwater is no exception. You got the flats, you got the beach, you got the wide open ocean, and so that trip, particularly where I was at in Cabo, like I said, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I was extremely naive, and I just like, as we were down there on a family trip, and I just happened to have one day extra time that I booked a trip and going, and it's like, when you're in the open ocean, especially there, like Cabo is like a mountain that drops straight into the sea. Like it's just a straight drop. There's no gradual wading out for miles, it's just like straight drop off cliff. It's like super deep. And so like to catch a fish on a fly, like they got to be up on the surface feeding, and the conditions have to be perfect for that. Otherwise, like you're out of luck. And the guy I was working with, he was just like, man, like most people come out here for the first time and they could get completely skunked. So you're lucky that you got one. It's like, but like even though I was fly fishing, like there's like a whole fleet that they had that they were communicating on the radio, people that were using spin gear and all that. And like I was like one of like 3 people in the entire fleet that even got on a fish that day. It was like a rough day condition wise. So I got extremely lucky, but it was still enough to like, get me so hyped and excited about the potential and opportunities. I'm such a rookie in that world, but I'm excited for the opportunity to learn. Yeah.
It's like they say, any tug, it's an addiction after that. The tug's the drug, right?
Right. You get, man, then I went to the other side of Mexico, went to Cancun this past fall, and I chased after some baby tarpon, and I hooked into one, and man, it like jumped clear in the air, 10 feet high. It's crazy. Wow. I lost it, but that was humbling. It totally humbled me because, man, I worked so hard to try to get into those tarpon, and I missed the one good opportunity I had.
Yeah, tarpon and bonefish are on my list for warm water fish there. That would be a blast. So, and I heard you can do both of them in Florida too. So that would probably be the extent of my my travel. Plus my wife has family there, and she's like, I want to go to Florida to see my family. I'm like, yes, ma'am. Let's go. That's funny. So you went to Utah State, huh?
I did. I'm an Aggie.
What did you major in?
So I actually got my degree in physical education. At the time, I thought I was going to be a teacher. I minored in Spanish, and so I thought I'd teach a couple subjects and be a coach, go that route. But it ended up not working out that way. I guess. Yeah, that's a long story for another day. I don't know how far you want me to get into that, but basically, I elected not to become a teacher. I'm not a teacher. Well, in the public school sense, I still feel like that degree is used all the time when I'm guiding on the rivers, and being able to help people evaluate their personalities pretty quickly and determine what are the best teaching methods to help them get into fish and learn how to cast and catch fish on a fly rod. So I'm still passionate about teaching, and I love like helping people get better, and I use that a lot with my guiding experience, but it's not my profession as a teacher now. I ended up, yeah.
No, go ahead, finish.
No, I was gonna say, so I'm not cool enough to be a full-time guide yet. I mean, eventually, maybe someday, but it's just a part-time gig for me, kind of a side hustle. I work for a couple of local outfitters, and they'll hire me for trips and things like that, as well as providing private services. But I do have a day job that pays the bills. And that was just kind of a long story how I got there, coming out of college and kind of working my way to where I am now, just working for a manufacturer and quality control processes and things like that. So, but I mean, that's not very exciting to talk about. That's who I am.
No, it's good. A lot of what we do in our daily life forms us to who we are, and everybody has an outlet from what it is that they do. I mean, that's life, right? And that's what I love about fly fishing, is that we all have our lives. We have our 9 to 5s. We just have the stresses and the concerns of everything. And that's why fishing is so valuable. And I think that's why all of us anglers, male or female, we connect, because we already have that common interest. You see somebody with a spay rod or a fly rod, and you're like, you too, huh? Yeah, you too. Instant conversation there. And any concern or stress or worry or job thing that you have, it all melts away. And I love hearing about what people do for a living, because somebody else, the newest person out here, might be like, man, I'm looking to get into a hobby, but my quote unquote job, it won't allow me to do it because of this and that. And somebody may hear what you do for a living, and they'll be like, hey, yeah, I do that too. And this guy fishes and he seems to have fun. Yeah. I think it's just a great opportunity to, give people hope out there that are maybe looking for something or searching for something. And, I'm sure you can attest to this, that the outdoors in itself is a great way to escape from, the realities and the responsibilities of life from there.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always fascinating to me and interesting how all our different aspects of life like bleed together. You can't really compartmentalize all the time, or at least I find value in learning everywhere I'm at. And it's kind of funny, because I look back on my professional career and where I'm at today, and the path that's taken me on has actually made me become a better angler, because it's so scientifically involved, and quality control is all about increasing efficiencies and mitigating risk and improving value. And I think about that sort of stuff when I'm out on the water. How can I get the most efficient drift in front of a fish to give me the best potential to catch him? And so I kind of use a lot of my professional experience out on the water to help me become a better angler in general. And so I've been grateful for that. I nerd out. We all do about fishing, and I think about it all the time, and always looking for the next angle to improve myself. And sometimes you get that insight just from your day-to-day or your work. And I've certainly received a lot of insights from my career on how to become a more effective angler, so to speak.
That's good. Yeah. So let's segue into the Stillwater part of that. So when you're out fishing, what's kind of the setup that, first off, where, if you want to name names, if not, that's totally fine. But what lakes are you primarily fishing?
Locally, I'm mostly in northern Utah or southeast Idaho. There's a lot of kind of smaller irrigation reservoirs. They're primarily used for farming purposes, for irrigation, or for agriculture, I should say. But they do hold a good, healthy population of trout in them, and they're pretty highly productive because they've got tons of food source, nice, clean, cool water. Everything perfectly ideal for a healthy growing population of trout. And yeah, so without giving too specific of names, it's just those general areas where I usually go for stillwater fishing.
Yeah, that's good. And then are you guys primarily on the bank fly fishing, or will you guys take a boat or a raft and go out there and fish for them?
I say it depends on the season and conditions. I mean, for the beginner who doesn't know, and the seasoned angler that already does know, I mean, trout are heavily influenced by the water temperature, being a warm-blooded creature, and so the behavior acts accordingly. And so sometimes, especially right after ice out or early spring, you'll get trout cruising the banks. They're in pretty close, pretty shallow, so you don't need to get out very far to reach them. But as the water warms up throughout the summer, they'll retreat to deeper water to stay as cool as possible. So as it progresses later on in the year, into summer, late summer, I'll be out in a personal watercraft, either a little pontoon boat or a float tube.
And then what's kind of like I honestly, I don't know much about Stillwater, so I'm kind of asking these questions for my own curiosity, because in Washington State here, our rivers close on the west side of the mountain. Our season goes from Memorial Day to Super Bowl Sunday. And then after that, the only thing that's open it's no secret, it's the Yakima River. Otherwise, on the west side of the mountains, it's all stillwater fishing. So
yeah,
I'm new. I come to the shop. I'm like, JJ, I want to get into some stillwater fishing. I'm using a switch rod. What kind of line setup would you help me out with?
The switch rod, I don't know.
Okay,
I don't ever use
go single hand rod then.
single hand rod.
Yeah.
Honestly, Stillwater can get kind of tricky. I don't know, to simplify it, I would start them out with 2 line setups. I would just a weight forward floating line and then a full sink line. And then you can get, intermediate sinking in between and all that and kind of get it more complicated. But I think starting out, those 2 lines would be what you're going to be able to cover the most amount of water at that. Yeah, when they're in shallow and they're cruising the line looking for nymphs, especially like early June when there's a lot of damsel nymphs in the water, I like to dangle a balanced damsel below an indicator on a floating line. You can pick up a lot of fish that way. If they're down deep, you're going to need that full sink line to reach them. And, but depending on where you're at, usually your standard 5 or 6 weight will work in terms of a rod. I like a little bit of if I'm throwing over a large rig, a little bit bigger nymphs and, bigger indicators, some long line, I like the 6 weight just because it turns the weight over a little bit better than the 5 weight. But if you're like fishing, upper mountain lakes and you got a lot of fish feeding on the surface, you want to take them on a dry, then, your standard 5 weight rod is going to be excellent for that. So, it just depends on the conditions, I guess. If you're walking in the shop and asking me what to do, I would ask where you're going, what time of year, and it's like the standard question for all fly fishing answers. It just depends.
Yeah. So I'll walk you through a scenario, I guess. I mean, like I'm going just to do you guys have man-made lakes out there?
Yeah, we got a lot of reservoirs.
Okay. So we have a local man-made lake here. It's, what are we in? The end of February, early March. I have a single hand rod. I'm kind of a beginner, intermediate there. And I know you said the floating line and the full sink from there. What length of leader and what would be some good flies for me to take with me to the lake?
Do you have open water there right now?
What do you mean?
All frozen. Well, we're all still frozen right now.
Oh yeah. It's all we don't have. We don't have any freezing lakes right now. I guess that is a thing. Yeah. Again, like I said, I know nothing about lakes, but it's all open water. We don't have any frozen lakes on the west side of the mountains here.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, here in the Mountain West, you can only fish rivers during the winter time if you're fly fishing. Otherwise, you're in ice fishing gear, and because all the lakes are frozen, all the still water's frozen right now.
Mm.
But in your situation, yeah, this time of year, you're going to be, there's still probably not a lot of insect movement as far as there's hatches going on. You might start to see some midges coming around. I don't know. I'm not familiar with Washington at all. I'm just
No, I got
speculating
you.
now.
Yeah. I mean, midges are everywhere, right?
Yeah. So if you got some midge action, then you're going to want, some zebra midges and all sorts of different midges, nymphs and a variety of colors. It's always good to have a variety of colors, but typically you're looking for your black and white, your reds and blacks, and red, black, and white. Any combination of those three colors usually covers your bases pretty good.
What size?
Again, depends on the size of the insects in your local lake, but it could be anywhere from as small as a size 20 up to as big as, size 12, even a 10, Talk about guys fishing out at Pyramid Lake and they're using huge chronomids out there. So and up in Canada, the same. They have really large midge populations, so you can get away with a 10 or pretty large sized midge.
And then this time of the year, would you use that in because it's colder water, use like an indicator setup with it?
Yeah, since it's colder, they're going to be anywhere probably higher up in the water column, but they can be out far from the shore, close in, so you could get away with an indicator. And it's kind of finding where the depth that they're cruising at, because if they're cruising only 10 feet down, then you want to set your indicator accordingly. But if they're in shallower than that or deeper, like I like to use a fluorocarbon leader. You can do kind of a tapered leader down to, my go-to indicator setup is I like to have a 5x, maybe 4x if I need to, just tapered fluorocarbon leader, and then I'll tie off like a swivel, or either a swivel or a my mind's drawing a blank, just like a little circle or a tippet ring. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So I like to use the slip indicators just because it's really easy to adjust depth. And sometimes if you got to go really deep, like 15, 20 feet deep, you hook a fish on a set indicator. At that point, it's almost impossible to get it in close enough to net them. So I like to have the slip indicator, because you get a strike, it pops loose and slides up and down the line. You can have plenty of room to retrieve your line and pull the fish in. So I'll set that slip indicator up above the tippet ring or the swivel, and then from there I'll tie on additional fluorocarbon, just straight fluorocarbon tippet, either 5x or 4x, depending on conditions and how small I need to go on my flies. And then from there, kind of figure out the depth of where the fish are at, and then you can kind of do the equation, do the math that way, setting your indicator at the depth that you need your flies down to. And yeah, I always like, wherever your local laws permit, like we're allowed around here to use 2 fly setups. So I always use the maximum amount of flies I'm allowed to. Mm-hmm. So I'll always do a 2 fly, so you can cover a little bit more water column, and as well as you can put like a bigger fly, more heavy weighted fly as the point fly, and then have like a smaller, more imitative fly up above that on your tag. And so like you're saying, this time of year, a lot of midges, but also you need sort of leech pattern. Slow stripping this leech this time of year can be highly productive in your black or your olive or any brown kind of leeches.
Okay, olive and brown. All right.
Yeah.
And then will you do any strip retrieving without an indicator, or do you primarily prefer to use an indicator if you guys could get out to your lakes right now? with this time of the year?
So actually, it's like pretty soon, the next couple of weeks, the things start to thaw out. You kind of have what they call the ice out. So that's like the first week or two right after the ice breaks off and recedes back from, you start getting open water. And like fish are like usually pretty aggressive that time of year. They're feeding frenzy. If you can time it right, that's some hot fishing, man. Like, and at that point, I like to use an intermediate sink or a full sink and just cast out and do a fairly quick retrieve with a leech pattern or some sort of bait fish imitation, because fish are feeding pretty aggressively at that point.
Bait fish, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, just a normal strip. Or are you like, strip pop pause, strip pit pop pause? Are you just kind of mixing it up?
It depends on what you're trying to imitate. So if you're imitating a leech, you're not going to be burning it through there like a bait fish, but you're going to do kind of a low. You mix it up, kind of find out what is working that day, whether it's a long, slow strip or a few short, quick strips, and then let it sink. Kind of mix up the cadence so you find out what's going to trigger the strike for that day. But it seems like, in my experience, they seem to like it a certain way on a certain day. So you kind of gotta mix up the retrieve until you figure out what they want. The hand twisting is a good, intermediate retrieve. You can easily YouTube that and find out what the hand twist retrieve is. But that's a pretty common one to use in still water, especially for chironomids, midges, and and slower leech presentations.
Yeah, that's something I was trying to play with, was the what's it called, the hand twist retrieve.
Yeah,
I tried dealing with that while watching a YouTube video, and I felt like such a spaz. I was like, it looks easy on the video, but when you start trying it, it's kind of just like line management on a spey rod. When we put it in between our fingers, it takes a minute to get used to that, and that whole retrieving part, it was like, the dexterity I didn't have, and I was like, I'm just going back to strip retrieving. Yeah, it takes a minute. And then I think I also saw you do some Euro nymphing also.
I do. I love Euro nymphing. It's usually my go-to tactic when I'm fishing the river. Again, I love it all. Like I'm always, that's what I love about fly fishing. That's how I fell in love with the sport. I first got into it for other reasons, but that's like what has kept me around. It's just the love of learning. There's always something new to learn and new tactic to try to become an expert in. I took like two years where I dedicated myself to Euro nymphing, and that's all I did. Like, I only took my Euro nymph setup and just like did that for 2 years straight and tried everything nymphing. Tried throwing a dry dropper with a Euro rig as well, which there's ways to do that, and throwing, Euro streamers and doing some streamer fishing, like the jig Euro stuff, and just try to just kind of master it as best I could in that 2 year period. And I loved it. It was awesome, and it's still one of my preferred methods to use on a river. But at the end of the day, like, I'm just like anybody else, man. I love to see that dry fly eat. I love to chuck streamers for bigger fish. Like, I just want to do whatever's going to produce fish. My goal is to learn as much and be prepared enough that I can walk into any situation and evaluate the conditions and be able to approach whichever technique I feel is going to be the best opportunity to catch fish that day.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I know a lot of guys, I got friends that are, meatheads, and all they want to do is chuck streamers, and that's all they ever do. And you got like your dryer die crowd. And I'm sure you spey rod people are another breed as well. I love it all. I want to be as well-rounded as possible. I want to, if there's a new technique and I don't know it, I want to learn it. So I know spey rod is on there. It's on my list to do. I haven't done that yet. So.
Well, I'm no expert, but if you ever make it to Washington, man, I can show you a thing or two, and I can plug you into the right people, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you got open invite here anytime. I got a raft and everything. We'll go float some nice rivers over here.
Sweet.
Same for you too, Marcus, if you're listening, buddy. That's one thing I really need to get back to. I mean, that's kind of my roots is, again, this was back in like 2006 before it was actually called Euro nymphing. My buddy Brian and I grew up in California, and we would fish the rivers there, and we started Euro nymphing for like steelhead and trout on, the Trinity River, the Truckee River. We had great success, as you can imagine, for trout. But when it came to steelhead, we didn't have too much luck on that. And do you guys have anywhere close by where you guys can go steelhead fishing?
Probably the closest is Idaho, honestly.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to show my ignorance here, but is that the Clearwater or the Snake River?
Yeah, I believe correct. Well, I'm a little ignorant myself, but I believe it's both. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, you got the Snake and the Clearwater in Idaho, so.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So when you go out, I'm just curious with steelhead.
And the salmon too, I should say.
Yeah, that one I know is out there. Do you ever Euro nymph for steelhead?
I know people that do it. I've never done it myself. So that's also piqued my curiosity, knowing that I can take this discipline that I've learned and probably with a few tweaks be able to go after some steelhead with it as well. So that's something I need to learn myself, but I look forward to that. Yeah,
that's one thing that, like I said, I've really been focusing on the last, honestly, 2 years with my casting. It's been such a challenge for me personally. I have good buddies of mine that have picked it up in like 3 months, 6 months, and they're casting lasers, and I've just been going through this ebb and flow. So this year I'm kind of relaxed on it. I have a good buddy of mine that's been giving me lessons down in Oregon. We've been doing it virtual, set up a tripod, put the phone out there, keep the Bluetooth phone earbuds, and he'll give me instructions while we go from there. But he's such a wizard. He can hear the sound of your rod and your line, and he can tell you exactly what you're not and what you are doing right. So he's been very instrumental to me. His name's David Flaherty, Left Coast Stay on Instagram. But that's one thing. Once our season opens back up, I'm going to throw a nymph rig with the indicator back on my switch rod. That's what I like to use the little switch rod for, is indicator nymphing, or if we get in like really close backdrop areas with trees down, those little switch rods, those sink tips on there can really make life a lot easier instead of using those big rods there. So yeah, that's definitely something I want to get back into, is kind of the roots of what I've, found in fly fishing.
Very cool.
What you mentioned earlier that you got into fly fishing for other reasons other than fly fishing. What got you into that? Like, what got you down the road of fly fishing?
Sure, my origin story of fly fishing. Yeah, man. Like from day one, I still remember I was 4 years old. My grandpa wanted to take me fishing, and so we were gonna go the next morning. And I stayed up all night. Like, I was so excited. I was like sitting on the couch, looking out the window, waiting for my grandpa to come. And I think I fell asleep on the couch, like right before he showed up. Next thing I know, I'm in his truck. We're driving to the river, and like, man, catching my first fish, it was like magical. It's like the best way I can describe it to people is like a kid on Christmas morning. I just always feel that way when I go fishing. I love it. I just love catching fish, and that's always stuck with me from day one. Like, it was immediate. Like, it was love at first sight with me. I don't know. Like, I know some people, different experience, different life, and it kind of grows on them. But for me, it was instant from day one. I just fell in love with fishing, and so I've always had that love. And the funny thing is, though, growing up as a kid, my dad was like anti anything outside of a worm and marshmallow. Like he was dyed in the wool bait fisher. Like that's all he ever did. And even like when me and my younger brother would want to like try to throw lures or something like that, he'd kind of like turn his nose up at us, like now I'm just going to use my worm, And I remember the day I decided to get into fly fishing. We were fishing at a local reservoir that we frequented a lot, and we'd gotten there early morning and we caught like a few here and there, like pretty standard day, nothing stellar. But I see this guy come by on his float tube and he's fly fishing, right? And it's just like, man, like every cast he's just hooking into one, just slaying them left and right. And I'm like, I want to be doing that. And so my very first initial introduction to fly fishing was like, I wanted to do it because I thought it would help me catch more fish. And yeah, that was like when I first got curious about it. I was probably like 13, 14 at the time.
Mm.
And of course, I watched A River Runs Through It, and that just made it seem like it was an art, just magic, and that just seemed so cool to me. But that was like all I really knew about fly fishing. So I thought it was all dry fly fishing. I didn't know anything about streamers or nymphs or, sink lines or anything. Like I just thought it was all dry fly fishing because you only know what you know. And all I knew was A River Runs Through It, Brad Pitt, fly fishing according to Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So me and my friend, 14, 15 years old, we went to Walmart of all places and bought like the cheapest little fly fishing combo that you could get. As a Cortland Fair Play. I think we like split the cost and it's like $50, and we bought that thing. And I remember going over to his house and just trying to learn how to cast in the front yard. And then we would go to like the local stocked pond in town, and man, catching fish there for the first time on fly rod, I thought it was awesome. This is so cool. And so kind of the tragedy of it all is I grew up all this time, bait fishing with my dad using traditional gear on the Henry's Fork, on the Snake Fork, these world-renowned fly fisheries. And as they're spin casting, it's just like, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we loved it. Like I remember going up to Henry's Fork and on a trip with my buddy that we bought that fly rod with, and like I said, I was naive, didn't know what I was doing. Had a Royal Coachman on, like size 16 Royal Coachman, and was just throwing that, hoping that a fish would look at it. And I caught a few, and I thought I was on top of the world. I thought I was awesome. And then I see another guy come by with a fly rod again, and he's just like slaying them left and right. But this time I was like, I'm gonna ask him. Like, I'm getting into this. I need to know. He told me what fly he was using. He was just using like a leech, and that was like the first time I remember being like, oh wait, there's subsurface flies you can use. Oh well, that just blew my mind. Like it's a whole new concept. And so it's just been like that, like little bit by little bit, just learning as much as I can and continually growing. And now it's just like, so I got into fly fishing thinking it would help me catch more fish, and I've stayed and continue to fall in love with it because of the art of it, but also the science of it. Like it's forced me to look at things differently and help me become more scientific in my approach and learn different techniques and why they work and what sort of, the behaviors of fish and what they're feeding on. And it's just helped me to look at that in different perspectives and different lights. And that's why I stay. I guess I started because I thought I'd catch more fish, and I stayed because of the challenge of the art and the science of it, and always opportunity to learn more. And it's just funner to catch fish on a fly rod than a spinning rod, in my opinion. And yeah, I love it. And now it's just the challenge of it. Like, especially we were talking earlier about saltwater fishing. Like you go out in the open ocean, that's like the hardest way to catch a fish is with a fly rod. Like you're way better off trolling with spinning gear if you want to catch fish. But man, hauling one of those things in on a fly rod, it's awesome. It's the fight of your life. It's awesome. I love it.
So cool, man. I love it. I love hearing how people get into it and how they get hooked to it and what grabs them from it. It's like I always tell people, it's not so much the fishing, but some people it can be the fishing, but it can also be the people that have gotten them to it. Like in your case, your grandfather, and that's what got you attracted to it from there, is because you had somebody that was a role model of some sort, to where you're like, oh, grandpa does it, I want to do it too. That's cool. Talk to me a little bit about the science, because I'm very scientific minded also, and I know that's a big field from there. But I mean, and just however you want to go with it, kind of talk to us about the scientific approach you have towards trout.
Sure. Trout specifically, I don't, definitely not an expert in anything else. um, don't know the first thing about behavior of saltwater fish.
Not
Trout,
yet,
right?
not yet. You will soon.
Not yet. Someday, hopefully. Yeah, trout. Like, so when I say scientific, I mean, you walk into any trout water, rivers specifically, in the Western United States, and you can diagnose based off of conditions. You can read the river. You kind of know where fish are going to be holding, because you know the behavior of typical trout, and you know a couple variables like weather conditions, the the flow of the river, the structure of the river, um, the water temperatures. All those things are kind of part of the equation that I take into account, and I adapt my technique accordingly. So like my fly selection, my presentation, that's all calculated based on the conditions and each piece of the equation that I take into account. It's kind of like a general explanation, I guess. That makes sense.
No, that does make sense. So I mean, obviously you can get very detail oriented with that when it comes to conditions. I mean, obviously you're taking in the river flow. I mean, do you look at weather patterns, temperatures, the moon, that it the phase that the moon's in, um, yeah, water, air temperature, and like air pressure? Do you go that far into it?
Uh, in a nutshell, yes.
Okay.
To a certain degree. I mean, I don't have the luxury of life of just going fishing whenever I want. I'm not there. I'm not in that point in my life yet.
Right.
So I can't sit and pick and choose the most ideal conditions to go. So it's kind of whenever I got time. And then when I know I've got time and I'm going, then I pay attention to certain key factors that I know will impact more than others. I mean, trout phase, like the moon phases that you're talking about with trout, that can affect their feeding behavior, but not as significant as other species, especially you're talking like ocean tides and things like that, where it has a huge impact on the behavior of those type of fish. Like, it's not as impactful, so I don't worry as much about moon phase, but some of those guys that are fishing in the dark, throwing mice and things like that on the surface for trophy trout, like that is a big factor to consider. So it kind of depends when you're going fishing, if you're going in the day or at night. But yeah, like weather for sure is always a big factor. And time of season, like the weather impacts much more during certain, like your swing seasons, like spring and fall. Like huge swings in temperature are going to have a much bigger impact on the behavior of trout than other times of year. Mostly because that will affect the temperature of the water and kind of their feeding behavior for that time of year. But yeah, I mean, flow is definitely a big one too to consider, just because your number one biggest obstacle, and I teach this to my clients when I'm guiding, like the very first thing you got to worry about, the biggest piece of the equation that you got to resolve is finding fish, right? You gotta know where they're at, be able to locate them. And flow is going to have a huge impact on where fish are going to be holding. where they stay in the river during high water versus lower water conditions. So kind of learning that, spending time studying flow charts and kind of paying attention to how the river looks during certain flows is going to be really helpful to you, and learning how to identify where the fish are going to be holding.
That's good. Yeah. That's kind of, like I look at, flow charts, pretty much throughout the whole week when I know that I'm going to be going out there. Like, the thing I've always been told is that when the river's on the drop, that's going to be, a good time to go because the fish aren't going to have to swim with much resistance from there. And obviously when the river's rising, they're, swimming against resistance there. So yeah, I'm gonna take some of those notes and apply that next time I'm out on the river there. Coach JJ.
And it all, like you said, it all depends. Like I adapt my technique accordingly. So say that, like you say, the river's on the rise. A lot of people get intimidated by that because it is a little bit harder than when it's lower. But if you know what you're doing, and you know where fish are gonna be hiding, or holding, I should say, that's that. When the river's on the rise is when I've caught some of my bigger fish, because that brings the big boys out, and they start hunting for smaller fish that get kicked around, and like bigger insects that get kicked up in the higher flows. So that's actually prime time to catch some bigger trout is when the river's on the rise. So don't be discouraged by that.
No,
just learn how to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, in the wintertime here in the Pacific Northwest, I mean, this is my third year into it, but this winter was extremely dry for us. Like our rivers in the wintertime will be typically between like 45 to maybe 7,500 cubic feet per second. And last year, the rivers were up at like 10,000 cubic feet. And so like at that point that the fish are going to be closer to the bank there. And I've had buddies tell me that, like, I primarily target steelhead trout and bull trout, steelhead and salmon in the rivers. And I've had buddies tell me that they've caught 15-pound steelhead that are like 20 feet out in front of them on super high flow water days, just using big profile flies and something that stands out from there. So I've kind of been forced into, learning how to fish the higher water. It's the lower water that's a little more challenging for me, but everybody's always like, oh dude, lower water is great. The fish are going to be all concentrated in one area. And I'm like, what's that say about me if I'm not catching fish then?
Yeah. No. And you raised another point too. I mean, think of this is also for those listening that may not know this too. Like not only like looking at the volume that's coming out of the wherever the gauge is that you're looking at, they're reading the flow chart. Like that same volume is going to look different on different sizes of river. Like
yeah,
Pacific Northwest, where you're fishing a lot bigger rivers than we have around here. 6,000 cubic feet per second is probably normal flow, but like you did that on one of the small rivers around here, that'd be like a flood. It'd be blown out completely and over the banks, and houses would be falling in the river.
Yeah.
It's what's what I'm looking for. Sorry, I drawn a blank.
No, so, I use those flows as an example, just because of like we have the big S rivers up here, and
sure.
they have all those heavy flows from there. They're just big rivers. But yeah, I mean, like I know the Yakima, kind of like a good range for that can be like 2,000 and above, cubic feet per second, because it's a canyon river there, and it's not as big as all those other rivers there. But yeah, some rivers or some creeks I've even been to, like one I fished back in California, 900 cubic feet per second. That was like flooding the creek, so yeah. It is interesting how much volume a river can handle from there. And that's how you kind of have an idea of, how big a river is from there. Like I know there's one river on the peninsula here that I think it's like 35 or 4,000 cubic feet and it's like blowing out. And I was like, whoa, I kind of thought those were all big rivers down at the peninsula, but no, I was fortunate enough to go to one last year and we were out there. I think it was like 15 or 2,000 cubic feet and it was just like a trickle. And I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. So that gets a lot of water there. So we'll end with this. So I'll let you get back to your evening. What's something that you're really you're learning right now in your fly fishing journey?
Well, I feel like we're beating a dead horse here, but like I said, my sights are set on the saltwater game, and so because of that, kind of, I obviously I live in Utah, so I don't have beachfront property. I don't have access to the ocean all the time. I got to make a trip for it. I got to plan for it, and that's going to be my opportunity for right now. But because of that, and the experiences I've had, I've kind of know now what to prepare for. So when I'm fishing here in Utah, I kind of try to do things that help me practice for that. Like for example, when you're trout fishing, even if you're like sight fishing, you see a riser, hitting surface flies. Like you have all day to sit there and like evaluate the river flow and kind of pick your spots of what's going to be the best presentation, the best spot to cast to get a good natural drift with the dry fly so the fish can eat because he's just hanging out there. So you could take all the time in the world to do that. Fly fishing in the ocean, it's completely different ball game. You got to be able to get your cast out 60, 70 feet in like under 3 seconds with accuracy where you saw the fish. I mean, so like I go out and I practice casting for those conditions now, like just trying to rip out, double hauling in like 3 hauls or less to get, 50, 60 feet out and practice like hitting spots for accuracy. And like, then you gotta have wind to account for and stuff. And so kind of my approach right now where I'm at in life is like, I love catching fish and just depending on the time I have and what I'm doing, I love it, dry fly fishing, nymphing. But I realize if the ocean's kind of where I want to go my next, schooling of opportunity to become an expert there, like I got to practice more the opportunities I have. And the thing is you only nymph for trout, salmonoids. you're not nymphing for anything else really. So any of the other species you're going after, like salt, warm water species like bass, pike, muskie, it's all streamer, and the same with the ocean. So kind of where I'm at my evolution of fly fishing is I'm heavily focused more now on chucking the big stuff and learning how to be an expert at streamer fishing, just because I know that's going to help me be better prepared for future opportunities to get out on the salt water.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good place and a good way to wrap it up right there, man. Yeah, I like that. Well, hang on, don't go anywhere. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody real quick that's listening out there. Well, everybody, thank you again for listening, and I hope you took some notes. I know I got some notes here on some trout fishing techniques that I'm looking forward to actually trying out here. But yeah, till next time, continue to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, everything Spey Rod Adventures. And till next time, make it a great day and be safe.